Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the founder of Momentum Brands, Brooke Budke. Brooke, how are you today?
I'm doing so good. It's a perfect audience for me because I'm in the emerging franchise brand category too. I love it.
Well, that's why we brought you on, Brooke. So I know that's your specialty. You're excited to talk about discussing trends with emerging franchise brands, and you do a lot of fractional CMO services for emerging brands. But before we get started with that, I would love for you to share with the audience sort of your background in franchising. I understand you were the president of Title Boxing Club back in the day. So share a little bit with the audience the origin of your franchise journey.
Yeah, I mean, I'll spare the details, as every great story has lots of highs and lows, as, every good book that especially your life story in a book. But I'd say, I got into franchising in 2013 and I came from the direct selling industry prior. So it was a very similar industry, but just with different scale. And when I started at Title, we had arguably probably 30 to 40 units. I don't recall the count, but we had a good little nest egg of locations open and had sold between 200 to 400 units. So it was a big pipeline of what we needed to open and little to no resources and no team. It was myself and, handwriting the marketing manual to the brand guide to the tools and resources to vendors and removing vendors and adding and all of this stuff. And I was new to franchising. So I failed a lot in that time. And from 2013 to 2020, during COVID was really like the big run that we had. And we had just shy of 200 prior to COVID. So we went from roughly 30-ish units to 200 in 8 years' time. In 2014, we were named the fastest growing franchise in America. And it felt like it every single day. I'll say that much. We have some really good war stories with all of the original crew that was really part of the growth because you just hold on to your seats because you're moving so fast. And you ask for forgiveness a lot because you're making decisions on the fly as you grow and scale that, as you gain data, you could look back on and would make different. But, that's part of the fun and joy of being an emerging brand is you're really like boots to the ground. How are we going to do this and grow it? So I developed the marketing team and brand. It had just gone through a rebrand. It used to be like cage paneling and MMA when it was first founded in 2008. And then when we really started franchising, it was more of a modern boutique fitness category for a 35-year-old female wanting to get a boxing or kickboxing workout. So changed the positioning, mission, vision, all of it. And, I'd say the biggest value that I've had in my career working there was all the different versions of the business that we tweaked it to along the way is really what I get to advise brands on today. And after going through an acquisition, they named me president of the company. It was January of 2021. And I was 3 months pregnant secretly because it was during Zoom and it's a secret during your first trimester anyways. I was like, gosh, I just achieved my top 2 life milestones literally in the same week of my existence. And I was sitting there like extremely overwhelmed, to be perfectly honest, because we had every unit shut down during COVID. And then we had new ownership come in. I'm pregnant. I was I had Axel when I was 38. So I had made it in my career. And then I finally achieved this life mission of mine was to become a mom. And I'm like, I got to just sit back and evaluate. So I thought long and hard about what I wanted to do. And I believe we are most qualified to help the people or person we used to be. And if I could go back in time and help Brooke as an emerging franchise brand with no tools or resources or really high level CMO thinking. What does she need? And that's really the origin of Momentum Brands and how it was founded. And, I'm sure we can unpack that story, but
Yeah.
spending nearly a decade at Title Boxing Club, fastest growing franchise in America, Inc. magazine. We didn't even believe it when we saw the award come out, but we felt it. And I learned so much in growing that fast and growing teams and franchise units and multi-units and all of it. And it was a great journey.
What a ride, Brooke. Seriously, from 2013 to 2020, that is like a lifetime in franchising that you had done over 7 years. Oh my goodness. So because the audience is made up of, founders of emerging brands or folks looking to get into franchising and potentially franchise their company, I think if we kind of go back in time to some of the things that you did right, and I'd love for you to share with some of the things that you think if you do it all over again, you would never do it this way, because what you accomplished by helping grow that brand so fast is what many of us aspire to do before we franchise, right? We have these dreams. I'm going to open 100 locations. I'm going to open 200 locations in 5 years. We're going to explode. But as we all come to find out, that's not necessarily the best way to go about it, because we don't always end with that smile on our face that that you have when we do grow that fast. So take us back to the beginning. You're a small team. What were some of the things, Brooke, that you guys did really well, and what were some of the big mistakes?
So I would say, as a small team, one of the biggest advantages that you have is doing it yourself. And one of the biggest disadvantages you have is doing it yourself. And that is really the big decision making that you have, is to know when to outsource or to add to your team or not. Because we did not have budgets. As you're a startup brand, you really don't have big marketing budgets. And we had a 1% ad fund, but the units were just getting open. So there's really not a brand fund to pull from anyways.
Right.
So we did a lot of things internally. I actually started my career as a copywriter and a proofreader and editor. And so I personally hand wrote every headline of every ad that was placed, to the call to action, to the website, to, we learned how to cut cost and do some things with the skills that we had. We would outsource graphic designers because we could easily, I worked with somebody in my prior career who was an art director and very niche and high quality work. So I knew, okay, great, she could knock out the design and I'll do the copy. So we saved agency cost, and we did a lot of things internally. And by doing that, we knew the exact brand and what we wanted to say and who we were and what we wanted to target, and we saved cost. Now, as you grow and scale, you can't, as the head of marketing, I grew and scaled myself. I wasn't always the marketing director, senior director, VP, et cetera, all the way up. And so you can't always be the one writing the headlines. So then I started bringing on team members. And usually the marketing department, you're looking for marketing specialists and not franchise experience specialists.
Right.
And I think that's usually an area that people fail often in emerging brands, is you do need somebody with marketing, but at least one person on the marketing team has to understand your actual core customer is your franchisee. And how you train him or her. And if you understand franchising, the simplicity of scale is a lot easier with far less bruises and bumps if you have somebody with franchise experience. If you don't, actually, that's where Momentum Brands comes in, because we give you the guidance and the direction, and then your marketing person executes internally the brand that you've known and built. So what we do at Momentum is, number one, the fractional CMO consulting. But the second part, aside from business intelligence, is we will actually, myself and my brand director are trained copywriters and designers. We write and curate your brand guide, your grand opening guide, your manuals ourselves. So you get a CMO brain on weekly calls with triage and business direction and insight, plus the tangible tactical tools that are also never inside of the business by individuals who ran franchise marketing teams. And so it's literally like the unicorn of all unicorns, because we're not a vendor, we're not a partner, and we're not a franchisor. But really, my qualifications of my team members, you have to have worked inside of a franchise brand and in marketing, because I think that lens is so refreshing to an emerging franchisor who needs somebody to say, if you tell me what to do, I'll do it.
Right.
I just need somebody to point me in the right direction. There's no shortage of hardworking, phenomenal concepts from emerging franchise brands out there. There is a shortage of like the gatekeeping of the directional, how do you avoid the landmines along the way?
So when you were title boxing though, and you guys were starting out, did you find that that was one of the landmines is there was too many things to do, too many ways to go and to try to hone the message?
Well, the message was we did a rebrand on the message and used an agency, and that was done just prior to me coming in. And then afterwards, we involved probably 2 or 3 years down the road, we worked with a company called Real Insights and Strategy from New York, and they helped us on vision, mission, core values, manifesto, some more of the heavy lifting brand essence. But the biggest issues I had when I first started were there was no direction on vendors and agencies, and everybody was doing it different. So there was a big cleanup process that had to happen before you could then say, let's put all the brand pillars in place. Because putting the brand pillars in place of all these ships that are out rocking in the sea, it just wasn't steady. So I had to like say, okay, bring it back to the drawing board. People were using uncles, brothers, cousins, and anyone in between to do their local marketing. So we had to also say, who are the partners we need to bring in to scale? And then once we had those partners in place, how do we put the foundational blocks so that they can do their job? So there's usually a cleanup process that happens, in your first 20 units, messes happen, which it's supposed to. That's like the nest egg. And then it's like, great. Now what's like the model for 200? It's usually not built off of the initial first concept in most cases.
Sure. Okay. So what was the silver bullet? How did you grow to 200 so quickly?
Well, we had a broker strategy on unit sales right out of the gate. So that was something that added extreme value to our business was we had a broker network, franchise sales organization, however you slice it, come in and support us. We also had, it was lightning in a bottle where group fitness was on the rise. It was founded in 2008. And at that time, there wasn't a boxing concept on the scene, and group fitness was something really hyper targeting the female demographic who had high net worth, willing to spend north of $100 a month on a membership recurring. And so even in our mission work, we made it very simple. Our mission was to be the best hour of someone's day, because you could do any workout and see an impact in your body. You could take any type of nutritional plan, high carb, low carb, high protein, keto, fish, whatever, as long as you're following something consistently, you're going to see results. So we knew that to differentiate ourselves, we wanted to be the best hour of someone's day. And that brand work was really where we saw it take off, of saying, if we focus solely on being excellent at customer engagement, member retention, onboarding first-time guests, and we promise when you're in our four walls to forget about your life, to be the best hour of your day. That was the sticky factor for customers and raving fans. I would say the unit growth was mainly brokers early on, and then we switched to an organic, and then we had multi-unit, right? So they were opening 2 or 3, 4 different locations. But really, from the customer point of view, like honing in on what the mission was, it's so different than what you think it is when you actually dial down to say, if someone's spending an hour of their time with you in a day, that's precious time for anyone. You better make it the best, and they'll keep coming back.
Yeah.
So that ultimately was our mission. And once we identified that, it was really a high amount of raving fans. We had a net promoter score and it was like 89 net promoter score, very high.
That is wild. Wow. You said something though that it can't be overlooked, because a lot of emerging founders, I don't think, realize specifically who their targeted audience is that they're marketing effectively. You knew who your target audience was for title boxing that I could have easily seen gone all wrong. And when you try to be everything to everybody, you focus on nothing. But you knew exactly who your audience was. How did you know that it was the 35-year-old woman was the person that you should target?
Well, there's a couple of things to look at when identifying your core customer persona. Number one, you always have more than one target demographic. You have the ideal, and then you have 2, 3, 4. So when you look at who was our ideal, first you want to always look at the data. Like, what is the customer telling you already? And who is the most frequent? And who is the one in your lead funnel? And who is the one then that joins? Because a male may have interest, but very rarely do they show up because the male ego is vastly different than the female in the fitness space. Especially too, a female thought, I need to know how to throw a punch. A male instinctively thinks, I know how to punch. And so even the ego play of the difference of the messaging, and we had men, we were 75% female. There were men that came to work out, but there would be a little short 5'2", 100-pound woman throwing punches a lot harder and faster than a man too, So partly it was women empowerment. The second part was we looked at the data. The third part was really identifying and looking at the cultural relevancy of what's going on and the shift that the females saw from 2008 to arguably right up to COVID, because fitness has seen tremendous changes in past after COVID. The female was in a boutique fitness center looking for connection, community, and a good workout and results. And so we knew, and the males just don't, they go to the golf course, they go to work, they have different outlets.
Right.
But the female was really, really seeking that at that time. She's looking for different things today, and it has changed. Boutique fitness is completely different, and HVLC, high volume, low cost gyms are surging right now. And it's actually the 18-year-old male that's a big buying demographic. But when you look at the trends, we first saw who's coming to the location, who do we want to target, who is our buying demographic, and who's making the decisions, and how do we reach her? So then we really narrowed in on the ads of what do you say and what channel, how often, how frequent, how much do you spend? But if you don't know the target, you're just shooting in the dark.
Right.
So many franchisees are willing to spend the money, but then they have distrust in the franchisor because they say, I tried this digital agency and it didn't work, and that's on you. But if the franchisor is not doing the job on the front end of finding the core demographic, the target messaging, the positioning, the strategy, the story, and most of all, what's in it for the customer, then you could put $1,000 a month in ad spend and it's still not going to net you people that convert, because you can get leads, but you want them to also come into to your studios or to your locations, and if you're a membership model, you look at lead to first time show to membership to retention. And oftentimes I would get calls and say, Brooke, I have a marketing problem. Help me with leads. And we would look at the data, and they didn't have a lead issue. They had a first time show rate issue. So what we did was say, great, people are interested, but then they get scared and they don't come in. So we introduced onboarding to them to say, great, you just expressed interest. I'm going to send you a video. I personally did the video myself, again, standing in a title boxing club location saying, I'm going to show you the ropes of what happens in your first class. I walked them through. I showed them what the process was, what the class is like. Here's the explanation. We can't wait to see you. We have everything you need. All you have to do is show up. Our show rate jumped exponentially because we decided to then onboard the leads, because they were just, there was a drop from I'm interested to I show up. So it's not only your target market, but how do you then nurture him or her to actually then buy what you're selling or to try it?
Right. And that's often the challenge we find when we have to dig in with the franchise owner on what the problem is, because it's often, I just need more leads. Or franchise development will say, I can sell more franchise if you just give me more leads. And that's not always the problem. In fact, it's usually not the problem is needing more leads. It's what we do with them when we get them.
Validation. Sure.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about some trends in emerging franchises. So first one you had mentioned is where you see the biggest need is grand opening support, right? So talk to me about that.
Well, so emerging brands, the opportunity is so rich because post-pandemic, the concepts that are coming into the game are insane. I have seen brick and mortars innovate. I have seen van concepts explode, and we have seen a new surge of virtual franchise, is what I'm calling it, where you don't have a brick and mortar or a van, and you're offering a service. For instance, one of our brand partners is a nanny agency, and she sources for high net worth families high quality vetted nannies. And so you have no brick and mortar and no van concept, but she has a tech stack that she has built herself that does the billing and the processing. And it's not just a placement fee, but she gets a percentage of every time the nanny shows up to the house. So her franchisees have very low overhead and can spend on marketing. So the trends of the categories alone, I've seen shift exponentially post pandemic. And then what's going on with the consumer is the consumer's buying habits and patterns change so much that every brand, whether you're emerging or not, needs insight on how to attract more customers and how to make them stay. And then the other part is AI has introduced new tools that can help people, but it also is making brands look robotic and cold. And so if you're using it to cut corners, but you're not using it correctly to tell it your voice and the narrative and your story and the position and the tone that you want it to use, and not to use emojis or not to capitalize hashtags, it's going to do what it does for everyone else, and you will sound like everyone else. And so there are even like hot takes on even how to use some of these tools that are coming out that people think it's helping them scale, and it really makes them look unintelligent and like they're cutting corners. And that's the last thing they want to do because they're just overworked. And so when it comes to grand opening, we actually have seen probably and met with 20 to 30 brands in the last month that are seeking grand opening support. And they're a concept of anywhere from 3 open units to 30 to 50 to 200. And because it partly doesn't matter the unit size and the scale that you have as much as do you have identified the duplicatable business model that works every time for your system. And there is a pre-sale for membership, and there is a pre-promotional for food, or there's something for service, or there's something for product, and how you get in front of them, when and how often and what channels is really the thing that brands are missing of, quote, cracking the code. Because once you have that, listen, we went to market multiple times and never sold title because we didn't have the proven grand opening. We had the units sold, but we didn't have the proven formula. So we went to work and built it out. And now it's like, okay, great. If I could have an entire business on just grand opening.
Right.
Like every brand needs a grand opening guide for their franchisee, and it needs to be customized and tailored to their audience, to their persona, and very tangible tips that they can take into the community, into digital, into social, into referral, and into building their lead pipeline with not just one resource.
You raise a great point, because the first thing we think of as a founder is I need a broker group, I need an FSO to sell franchises. But if you don't know how to handle the franchise, once you've gotten that franchise fee, or you've distributed out between the broker and the FSO, and you have nothing, and you're now waiting to hopefully build royalties, that's where everything starts. That's where businesses fail. That's where emerging franchisors start stalling out. And going back to your earlier point about spending money in marketing, we know that franchisees, they'll listen to what you tell them and they'll believe you until they don't. Because if you don't have the marketing crisp and they don't see an ROI on their marketing, they're not going to do it again. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, to that point, that is the sheer reason actually why I even named the company Momentum Brands, because I believe that success leaves clues, number one. So how do we create the roadmap of clues for franchisees to follow and duplicate, prove the success model, and leave the clues, the little breadcrumbs? Follow me this way, Mr. and Mrs. Franchisee, to profitability and success. The other part is progress equals happiness. And when you have franchisees that are progressing in their business and they see momentum in their efforts, they will do it over and over and over again. Because in most cases, franchisees are exceptionally hardworking people. And in most cases, they've bought into a brand or a concept that could take off. So it's not an effort issue and it's not a concept issue as much as it is a documentation issue of what works and how do I do it over and over. And like using social media as an example, so many people say, I want to go viral. I want to go viral. Well, you don't go viral until you've tried every which way, posting every day, and you post one thing. Listen, I went viral a couple months ago. It has 1.1 million views. And it was something I absolutely thought 5 people would do and laugh at me for doing it. But it's because I was posting consistently. I knew my audience. My thing on Instagram is tips to help you create momentum in life. My thing in business and LinkedIn is momentum in your business. And I put my face in a bowl of ice, and I do ice water plunging on my face to help my complexity and everything. Instantly 1.1 million views of women saying, I want to know how to do this. And all you need is a bowl and ice, by the way. You don't need money, so it's free.
Right.
But I had learned what my audience wanted, and I posted it thinking my friends were going to make fun of me, and it popped off the charts because I had posted every single day. So it's a great example of franchisees saying, if you're going to do the work every single day, which they're committed to doing,
Mm.
if you point them in the right direction and you give them the encouragement, keep going. It's the long game. There
Right.
is no magic bullet in social media and ads and messaging and positioning. It is the long game because you
Hmm.
can never stop marketing, and you have to keep twisting and turning as the consumer turns, but you have to do it every day. And so if you can just create progress, the franchisees are happy. If they see the progress in their lead count or in their sales or in their membership or in their product, there's very few negative franchisee sentiments and brand if the sales are there.
Hmm. Yeah.
But if sales are not there, it is always a marketing problem.
Sales is like in sports, we say winning cures all.
Always. It doesn't matter if it's 1 point.
Right.
A win is a win.
A win is a
Yeah.
win. Okay. So the second big need that you're seeing is for emerging franchisors is brand strategy, you said.
So when it comes to a founder concept and emerging, I think the IFA actually categorizes emerging as anything under 100, which is wild.
It's a bit wide. I like to say 50 just to kind of put some
Yeah.
sort of cap on it because, well, you could be emerging for a very, very long time, or you could be emerging forever if the number was 100. But
Right, because there's only 16%, and I still think that's high. That gets over 100 units in
that's
franchising.
crazy. I know that is wild.
It is. It is. So if you look at emerging, let's say 50, right? You used 50, 1 to 50 as an emerging. And typically what happens is there's a really good founder concept, and then they have 1 to 2 other locations that also are proven and it's saying, yeah, I'm in a franchise. We're going to scale. Let's go. And the brand essence was created off of 1 location, but it changes when then you start to franchise and say, what's the model? How are we going to value engineer it? How are we going to position it for the masses? What's going to be culturally relevant? How are we going to scale it? The brand position does need to be more sophisticated at that point because you're now playing in a different league. You're swimming with the sharks versus your local mom and pop who know you and want to support you. So when you then go to scale, your brand essence and positioning has to be done by someone with business intelligence and franchising and marketing in order to really see the masses, because who you are in Overland Park, Kansas is vastly different than McKinney, Texas.
Sure.
Like those people won't know you there from Adam, and they won't support you if they don't know what your position is. So what we like to do is help brands first establish their narrative. And that really is like at the top, your strategy, your vision, mission, core values, the DNA, the tonality, key language that you need to use every single time over and over and over, what you call your front desk versus your managers versus whomever, to creating the customer personas. That's all part of this nest egg because you're building then the foundation on solid ground, because then your content plays out of this, your social plays out of this, your ad sets play out of this. Everything is formed once you have that. And oftentimes brands see we have a great logo and I love our branding and we have good colors, and that is important in the identity. But the identity to the customer isn't your logo. It's what they say about you when you're not in the room. And so what we like to do is really cast that narrative so that they can say it over and over and over. So their frontline says it over and over and over. And then the customer eventually says it when you're not around. And it has to be sticky and short. It can't be long.
Yeah. And probably a lot of emerging franchisors, they miss that. First of all, they're spinning so many plates when they're starting out. They're not even thinking about strategically, what does the brand truly stand for? And you really do need outside perspective. You have, at the moment, is it 9 brands right now that you're working with this year, right?
Yeah, we had that last year. So we have anybody comes to us at any given point in the year. We currently have we have different partnership levels. Our gold partnership, which is our more entry level, is at capacity because there's so many emerging brands that are interested. However, we have different ways we can work with companies. So I can share that. But I think my counsel really is like when you get to the level of franchising and you're an emerging brand, you have to learn it's almost like starting over because you have a concept that was great, but you have to learn the game, the lingo, the
Mm-hmm.
pitfalls. There's franchise language that's out there. Then there's all the vendors and partners. Then there's like, what do you do versus the franchisee? And one of the tools we create is a responsibility matrix. And this is so helpful for a franchisor to have is what do we do and what do you do? And it has to be in every category as tactical as possible because you have to create buy-in with the franchisees. They see what you do, they see what they have to do. Clarity is kindness in franchising.
Mm-hmm.
If you can be very clear with a franchisee, they understand your best interest is at heart, whether you do a lot or a little. If they have very clear understanding of what they're supposed to do and how to win, they're going to do it. But there's so many emerging franchise brands that don't understand. You're starting over. Running a franchise business is different than running a concept.
Right. Absolutely.
And so that's really where I think it works for people to work with someone like myself, or there's a couple other fractional CMOs out there that I can easily recommend too, if their model's better. But it's really playing at it in a new ball game of saying, how do I take success clues from someone else and duplicate them with what works for me and what also works in franchising? And then you create that like nest egg. And then all of a sudden you're playing with the bigger players.
Mm-hmm.
And you compress decades into days of learning because franchising is the essence of success leaving clues. You're creating a franchise model to tell somebody else what to do. Well, that's why I created Momentum Brands because every single franchise needs the same thing. They just need them in different orders. Some need brand, some need fran dev, some need consumer, some need grand opening, some need local store,
Mm-hmm.
but they all need all of them.
Right. Right.
I mean, they do. It's just in different orders. So like really it's learn how to play in the major leagues. Otherwise, you'll always be in the minors.
Right. It's a super competitive industry that we're in nowadays. And with the influence of private equity in franchising, it
Yeah.
has stepped up to that even if you're not a private equity backed brand, you're competing with private equity backed brands with money. So, welcome to the big leagues if you're an emerging franchisor. And I don't say that in a way to discourage people to be in franchising, but just know that the pressure is on to do it right because we only got one shot at doing this.
And arguably, what I have seen is the concepts that are not backed by PE
Mm-hmm.
have wildly higher raving fans in the customer space than ones with PE because the decisions become different when you have somebody else that's not in the business running them. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying it's not good. I think it's a great thing to have exits for businesses. You always build a business to sell it one day, eventually, hopefully, for most emerging brands.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love PE being in the game. I would say there is a strategy though that you can play as a small fish to look as sophisticated as the big dogs, but
Yes.
actually have more sticky staying power for the customer who likes that you're not at that level because today's customer, especially in AI, knows when somebody does have heart in the brand or not.
Yeah, you could argue that you could be more nimble.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So let's hit on the third one then. So you mentioned to me before we started the show about this big need that you see for franchisors in organic fran dev marketing.
One of the things I see most common is franchise brands saying, I don't know how to scale on
Mm-hmm.
FranDev. And so they go the route of hiring a broker and then they feel uncomfortable about handing out all of the fees and the
Mm-hmm.
commissions, but they know they're adding scale. The rub is that emerging brands need the franchise fees for funding most of the time, the business while they're running it.
Right.
So you need both arms. I love a double strategy of attracting great brokers or a franchise sales organization that can help you add scale
Mm-hmm.
and you're comfortable paying the commissions that come with that while you're also developing out your organic lead flow and managing and nurturing leads yourself and bringing your own candidates through the pipeline that you also collect full freight on the franchise fee because most emerging brands are either going through fundraising or reliant upon franchise fees upon the start. So if you go the broker route, I think it's great because you add speed to market, which is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you play off of the emerging organic brand story, I think it needs to be both to do it well because then you're getting the franchise fees and you also have this organic story that you're telling. So one of the things we like to do is advise upon really identifying the message points and the proven methods of telling your story over time organically. So like LinkedIn and digital ads, even though digital paid ads normally is not an organic strategy, in this case it is because it's the brand running ads themselves and not paying a broker to bring them to them. So two things we like to put in place are digital ads and some great agencies and partners to help brands grow. But the other is an organic LinkedIn content strategy.
Okay.
And I mentioned that this is the long game, but in franchise development marketing, you have to say what you do in different ways every day of the week in the space that the buying decision makers are, which is LinkedIn. Every single franchisee that has made it in their career has a LinkedIn profile of some sort. Usually, in most cases, probably 90%, whether they're active or not. And that is where the future leaders that become franchisees of your brand are. It's also where the multi-unit franchisees are and where the vendors are. And there is a big play for franchising on LinkedIn. And we always advise in a daily, Monday through Friday, LinkedIn content strategy. We help brands create the pillars and what's important to them and the revenue streams and the founder story and how you tell it, how you say it over and over. Because if you were to post 52 weeks out of the year, 5 posts a week, and you're telling it that many times over and over and over in a different way, it's going to hit on a lot of people. Your content will be served exponentially to more eyes. They will validate when they come through the process. And then if on top, if you get your team to engage with and share the content, it hits their networks. You're going to find a lot of people who are interested in your brand that way. And it's going to cost you time, intelligence, and a resource that's actually posting the assets. And so it's a very low hanging fruit tactical thing brands can do. But again, the staying power and the fact that brands are not doing it is wild.
Right.
Wild.
And do you think most brands then, where they're making mistake is they think they have their message and they just keep hammering home that one same message, as opposed to, like you're saying, it's key to mixing it up to appeal to different people?
It's a really great question. So when it comes to content strategy for franchise development, what I see most often is brands posting new deal alert. It's like the one thing that you see over and over.
Right.
Just new
Yes.
deal territory announcement, new deal alert. And I'm like, that's really great. I don't stop doing that. And it shows that people are buying, but show them other parts, show them why they're buying, show them the founder, show them the marketing team, show them the ops team. Even if it's one person, they still want to know there's support there. Because when candidates buy, they buy for the concept, they buy for the founders, they buy if there's franchise experience and what the revenue streams are. Because if they're interested in the category, listen, if you're going to buy a porter potty franchise, you got to be comfortable schlepping some SHIT because
Right.
you're going to have to do that one day because you have to do the worst of the worst before you buy a brand. If you're going to get into fitness, you got to mop the floors. You got to think about what's the worst part. And so if you have a category, you also want to tell them the best part, the worst part, how you avoid it, how you coach on it. There's so many parts and brands that are doing it well. Like we met with an emerging franchise recently, I won't say the name, and they have a training week that's 3 weeks long, and they teach the franchisees the technical training that's 3 weeks long. I have never seen a more robust training program than this. I said, you need to tell people about it because that is a differentiator. I met with another franchise concept last week, and they have an in-house construction team that does the build out for the franchisees. I said, my gosh, you need to tell people about that
Right.
because they
That's a
have
huge pain point.
huge pain point that
Yeah.
they've already solved and they don't even know that that's great. And then you have other brands today that are coming in and they're doing internal marketing on behalf of the franchisees in-house. That's another trend that you see in brands right now. Then tell people what exactly they're going to pay and what your team is going to do so that they can just go deliver community marketing. Like there are these feathers in brands' caps that they don't even see that are there that could attract so many more candidates and qualified candidates to join the franchise brand just because of their uniqueness. And they might not even know it's unique.
Right. Organically. Now, what about paid advertising? What do you think? What does it take now, Brooke, for an emerging franchise from a Fran Dev budget, annual budget, you think, to get the
Well, when you
job
look
done?
at budgets for digital, I think a lot of brands have been told by a lot of agencies they have to spend north of $10,000 a month on paid ads for franchise development. And I would say I disagree. I truly believe if you have a specialist in play that has your core, you got to build your personas. You got to understand who your target audience is.
Mhm.
And then you build out really good, short, concise messaging for even if you just do Meta. So you do Facebook and Instagram ads for your potential franchise candidates. And you have a really clear target, and you have really clear messaging and great brand imagery or video, you can do a lot with $2,500 to $3,000 a month in generating leads. In fact, some of our brands we work with are seeing a $13.50 cost per lead for Fran Dev leads
Wow.
Facebook because we're just setting them up correctly. So it's not like some of the big brands might want bigger fish, so they need to have bigger budgets, but I don't think you have to spend that much in order to get your pipeline rolling. But your content performs better when you have organic content daily on your social channels. So Meta rewards ads and will serve them more if you are posting every day on Facebook and Instagram too. So it's not just a, hey, how do we get cheaper cost per leads? It's what are the stories you're trying to tell and which channels, how often, and then how much do you put behind it?
So, Brooke, I want to drill into a little bit more about Momentum Brands. So, you mentioned earlier about these different levels of working with you. What are those levels, and how does it all work to work with your company?
So what we found at Momentum Brands was that partnering with brands weekly is really the golden ticket because you need to see that progress every Monday. And that's actually even the day we have our calls with our clients. It's all pretty strategic. I also start every call by asking our partners what are they celebrating because the number one thing in franchising are fires and issues and I can't sleep at nights. And so every single call I say, Frank, what are we celebrating today? And you know what they say every single time they go, oh, I know you're going to ask me that. Hold on, hold on, hold on. And then they think about something really great that's happened in their business because momentum also sometimes can just be a shift of point of view
Right.
and looking at the things that are also really good that you're doing. Because when you're growing, you feel like there's so many things on your list that nothing is working. But if you stop every 7 days and think, what have I done that's great? It's also a really important tool that we like to use. And then when you think about weekly cadence with someone to see the momentum and traction in their business, we really do want to partner with Brands Weekly. So that's our primary offering is a weekly agreement for the course of a year.
Okay.
We typically see brands needing 2 to 3 years worth of work when it comes to building out the infrastructure, tools, and resources for their team, grand opening, local store marketing, consumer, franchise development. And then there's another arm, which very few people talk about, which is like the internal setup of how do you communicate to your franchisees, train them, webinars, your intranet, how often are you providing resources, all of that arm too. So it does take time for brands. Most people always want it like the very next day, and it's part of it is that it does take time. So weekly is our platinum agreement. We do have one that's twice a month, and that is actually reserved for, we only have 2 spots for that because it's actually more difficult, in our opinion, to see momentum quicker when you're meeting with people twice a month versus
Sure.
week. But we do have amazing partners that are crushing it because we now have shifted and we give them agendas to meet with their own teams internally on the weeks we're not meeting. So they're still seeing that traction. And then we have one layer above it, which is our diamond. And our diamond is our platinum agreement plus all of the LinkedIn organic content. Like we will design it, write it, and curate it and give it to you. So oftentimes people are like, I love what you're saying, but I don't have anywhere to start tools or resources. And so what we'll do is platinum agreement, which is our weekly fractional CMO service. It's myself and a brand director on your team. And then we also will do in the diamond that plus build out your LinkedIn content. We don't post it for you. The team posts it themselves, but we will write it, curate it, design it, and then it's all aligned with the brand essence anyways that we are doing and developing. So there's 3 levels. It's biweekly, weekly, or weekly plus content. And then we are actually opening up now because I always knew that this was a need in the franchise space, but I had no idea how big the need was. And we have so many brands saying, can I just get an hour of your time, an hour of your team's time? And so we are also opening up soon some hourly consulting where there's no strings attached. You can pick our brain, do a data dump, data transfer from
Hmm.
me to you, ask me anything. More traditional consulting. And so those are also available to book by the hour for brands. And we could do tactical strategy, high level. And you could either work with myself or someone on my team who I've personally trained and handpicked. So those are really the models today. And we have some really awesome things in the works for new launches in Q3, Q4, with just helping. Even we have franchisees reaching out saying, what should I do in marketing? So just some more tools and resources are coming in the pipeline soon too.
Very cool. All right. Well, if someone was interested in working with you, how can they get more info?
TheMomentumBrands.com is our website. So please visit TheMomentumBrands.com. We have a couple of pages of just overviews of what we do. And then I'd be happy to meet with anybody. I do a free 30-minute session where I just chat with them on the phone and answer questions and learn about the brand. So any emerging brand I would love to speak to for 30 minutes of my time. I'm a former brand president, CMO, and franchise guru, if you will. And I mix in some personal development to it too. So if nothing else, let's network. And I'd love to see and hear about the brands that are looking for support. It also helps me add new products down the road if these brands are saying this is really what I need too. So I love speaking with emerging franchise brands. And then my email is brooke@themomentumbrands.com. And I have a pretty active LinkedIn presence. I'm also on Instagram. So any of those places are easy to follow. I give daily tips, and themomentumbrands.com. We have an easy contact us form on that too.
Great stuff, Brooke. All right. Well, last thing, I always finish every podcast with the tip jar, because the franchise community is so generous. You have been so generous with sharing. But all right, last question is this. So I am an aspiring franchisor and I'm looking to franchise my concept. What is one piece of advice that you'd give me before I franchise my company?
If I were to give anyone a piece of advice, I would say to understand that people make the difference, and who you have on your team, especially early on, need to be fully bought into you, the brand, and working really hard, because there are going to be a lot of sleepless nights. And if you're an emerging concept looking to franchise, to know that you are getting ready to become a beginner again, and to be a franchisor is so different than to be an entrepreneur. And there is a heavy amount of documentation and strategy involved in that. And so to know when you're ready for the big leagues, to reach out and to get resources like yourself on this podcast or with myself. And the franchising community is a great place to network. And there's so many people that do so many different things. So it always goes back to people. Your mom and dad used to always say, it's not what you know, but who you know. And I think that's also true in franchising, just the same. So building your network, but the people on your team are the ones that you got to eat, sleep, and live with.
Totally.
And to know that your team has your back, that they make sure there are no surprises. Things are going to go wrong. And if they could tell you when it goes wrong, so you're not surprised, that'll also alleviate a lot of the burden, because there will be issues and pitfalls. And to just be tough as nails, because franchising is a beautiful concept. It is a great industry. It is a really awesome way to get your product, service, membership into people's hands. But you got to be really, really strong. And that's strong-minded and strong physically and strong mentally, emotionally. You got to take care of yourself as a leader.
Look, that is great advice. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it, and look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.